Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Mömus Stuff for Car Guys. In today's episode we are going to work on the Audi A6 2.7 bi-turbo C5 4B Avant, and we are going to work on the rear brakes. So as you have seen in last episode, or might have seen, I replaced the pads and the discs in the rear and one of the calipers, and I thought that would have solved everything, but we've got another sticking caliper now, and so I thought maybe it's interesting to take a look at why these Volkswagen and Audi rear calipers fail so much. And so here we are at the back side of the vehicle. As you can see, those ugly replica wheels are now gone, luckily, and we have some original Audi wheels and some new hardware. As you can see, new wheel bolts. Well, it's nothing special, but way better than it used to be. So, well, there you have it. A new brake pad, a new brake disc, and another failed caliper. As you can see, that brake disc even still has the cross marks on it, and decided to fail. The caliper decided to fail within the first 100 meters. So what you're going to need for this job is, of course, some kind of brake fluid reservoir like that one that has a one-way valve on it, so you can pump the excess air out of the brake lines. And you're going to need a replacement brake caliper. Now this one is very nice because it came with the whole handbrake assembly new as well, which is one of these points that fail as well. So let's take a closer look. So what happens is that your handbrake cable comes in like this through this bracket here and has a little ball on the end in which way it stays in place there. And when you pull the handbrake, this whole bracket will compress because you're pulling on it, and then the spring compresses with that and pushes out the brake caliper piston, which is in there, to squish the brake pad onto the disc. Then you have your disc here, and there's another brake pad, and this whole assembly will then squish onto the brake pad, the brake caliper bracket, which is still attached there, and will push the other pad onto it as well. So what happens here is that this whole assembly rusts over time, gets crud in it and so forth, and just becomes ugly in all forms. So when you compress the handbrake, one time it's so rusted up and so crudded up that this whole assembly will compress and this whole bracket will go there but will never release again. So this spring is so rusted up it might even snap. I've seen cases where it snaps, and or it might just rust in place there and not release back. And what happens then is that that piston will stay in place and you will not be able to drive much. The other problem of this caliper is, of the original VW Audi caliper, is that here's your brake line attached. You will push on your brake, extra brake fluid comes through that line into here and pushes that piston forward to again do the squishing of the brake pads together. And your whole brakes in the rear are dependent on this little seal here. That is a 15-cent part that makes your brake not work, essentially, because what happens is over time it disintegrates, grips, and crud gets in there, water gets in there inside of the cylinder, and rust will form. And so what happens is one time you push again on your brakes and the piston will come out, but it doesn't return because there's so much rust and crud in there that it's just stuck. That is the most common problem on all these VW Audi brake calipers and why they fail. We will see when we're going to take this one apart that happened probably there as well. So coming back to the piston, that is one problem. And so as you can imagine, this squishes one brake pad onto the cylinder, but there's nothing squishing it there, right? So this caliper is actually mounted on a bracket that is still attached there and is on sliders, and so this whole assembly, because this pushes, it will push into the disc right, and therefore this whole assembly will push backwards off that because there's so much pressure building up, and the brake pad that's here will then be pushed onto the disc as well. Now the calipers are mounted on sliders, and they can get some crud in it as well, causing one of the pads, this one, to stick on. It's also a problem, but it's not as bad as this sucker there. That's the main problem of these Volkswagen Audis. So let's take this one now apart. Well, just like I thought, well, that rubber boot there completely failed. As you can see, here's the piston. It came out, probably stretched a little bit too far or something like that for the rubber boot, and it has snapped and is now retracting into the cylinder. It's just a complete waste. This 15-cent part cost consumers so much with these Volkswagen Audi rear calipers that constantly needed to be replaced or repaired. That's just a pain. Another note is when you're taking this apart is that you need to disconnect, or it's better to disconnect the brake line at the back. It's a 13mm bolt whilst it's still in place on the bracket, because otherwise it becomes a pretty tough job to do. This one is already loose, that's good. And now I'm going to disconnect that handbrake cable, which is also always a real struggle. So not looking forward to that much. As you can see, the handbrake cable is finally off, and it only took 1 hour to do so. So now is the time when we're gonna have to juggle a bit and be quite fast, because we're gonna take off the brake line from this one and attach it to the new one. And of course you don't want to spill all over the place and make quite a mess underneath, which is already happening because it's loose place. So now we need some new of these brake pad clips. They go right here and right here, and they prevent the brake pad from sticking to the caliper bracket, and we'll be able to slide back and forth much easier. And then we have some new bolts to attach this caliper, and then we're done. So I'm gonna put everything back together. There we are. So brake job finished. Most importantly, they're totally free again. Brakes are already bled, so that's finished. I'd say we put the car down on the ground and we're done. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.